Hi, I'm Brad, and this is the most exhausting video I have ever made. Recently, there was a lot of leaks, or supposed leaks, for a Quest Pro headset. And being me, the person that I obsessively am, those leaks were not good enough. I wanted to see if these things were real, and if there was anything related to it that I can go off on to really take it to the next level. And oh boy, after many hours, I found so many things. I can't go back. In fact, the insanity has driven me, well, insane. So for those who do not know or maybe a little out of date, there were some weird posts on Reddit about a dreamer who basically gave some really specific specifications of what a Quest Pro headset could be. A lot of people dismissed it, saying this is probably incorrect or at least an older prototype. And what I'm here to say is, it's mostly correct. In fact, I'm also here not to only say that there's a Quest Pro in the works, there's also a Quest 2 Plus. That's right, a Quest 2 Plus. First, before I begin, I want to sort of say this out loud. If there's any Facebook lawyers watching, because I know they're out for blood right now. I got all this information searching a bunch of firmware files, kernel updates, and of course some leaks and patents that I usually like to go over anyway. So basically what I'm saying is, you got nothing on me. So first of all, I'm going to talk about all the differences that these new headsets will probably have when they get announced, or at least one of them gets announced next month for Oculus Connect. People are very confused why they do not see the tracking ring that made sort of the Quest controllers so distinguishable among other players. Well, the main reason is they're actually getting rid of it because they no longer need it. I'm going to explain why in a second, but before I do, I want to kind of explain how current VR controllers are tracked. This is a prototype HTC Vive, well, controller. It looks pretty simple, right? I mean, it's obviously very old, but on top you see there's some old Lighthouse sensors. Lighthouse, for example, are these things. They're just emitters, honestly. They emit IR and laser sweeps. Well, what if I told you that really, this thing doesn't actually do much? There's something in the controllers for most VR headsets called IMUs, inertial measurement units, which really detect how much they're moving around and rotating. But when you only have IMUs, you get something called drift, which is like your controller slowly drifts away from you or the direction you don't want it to go. So companies had to figure out how to solve the drift or at least make it less noticeable. Valve would use Lighthouse base stations to give off IR and laser sweeps to sort of triangulate the position to solve the drift problem. Whereas Oculus would use cameras to solve the drift problem. Again, both controllers use IMUs, but they use other systems to solve the drift. And the way that Oculus Quest controllers have worked is they have a tracking ring around the controller that everyone knows about, and they would have lit IR LEDs. And the cameras on the headset would see those rings light up, and then would be able to triangulate the position to solve for the drift with the IMUs built into the actual controllers. And it worked for a while. But the issue with the Quest is there was something called the dead zone. When anyone would have to put the controllers behind their head or somewhere where the cameras could not see, the drift would start happening again. This was also a problem when you would hold a gun up to your face and one of the controllers gets really close to your headset, the cameras cannot accurately see them in the FOV. So again, more drift would happen. But according to the leaks and some, well, major patents, Oculus has decided we're going to put cameras into the controllers. The point of this is the controllers will now be able to track themselves with a built-in chip that also runs on Android. That's right, these controllers will run on a very basic version of Android, and they will actually send the actual data for each camera, or each controller, to the headset, and the headset will also do the triangulation and solve for drift. But there is something more going on. Not too long ago, I talked about how the Valve Index 2, or at least Valve has patented a new tracking system for the Valve Index 2 that basically puts the IR emitters from the Lighthouse onto the headset. Again, that's a very basic way of explaining it, but I talked about how they were going to do that to make a inside-out markerless tracking system. Well, it seems that Oculus is very interested in doing the same thing. They have used something called OmniVision, near-infrared and pure cell chips, or sensors, to give off a constellation of light. This is actually very similar to how the Microsoft Kinect would sort of do tracking, or at least depth sensing. They would send out a constellation, which is like a bunch of stars, out toward the front of the headset. And using the special cameras with the constellation, they were able to get some really accurate tracking. And this is what the controllers will also do. The headset's going to give off a large constellation of IR LEDs, and if the actual controllers are in that constellation range, they're going to have even more accurate tracking than what the current Oculus, well, Quest 2 has. But let's say the Constellation, which of course has an FOV of itself, what if the controllers no longer can see that? Well, it's still fine, because the controllers in these new headsets will actually be able to track themselves outside of the Constellation zone with the backup IR cameras that are kind of working the same way as the head tracking did for the Quest 2. And also by removing the ring and doing all this stuff, you can also hold it close to your face as well. John Carmack was actually talking about this last year, about how he really wanted to implement cameras into the controllers for a more accurate tracking system, and it looks like we might see that in fruition literally the next month. People might be wondering, well, wait a minute, isn't there sort of limits to what the XR2 can do? Can't they only have 7 cameras on the XR2? Again, that's where the actual chips built into the actual controllers are here to do. And they also patented a special way for the actual controllers, the chips on the controllers, to sort of, I would say, create JPEGs of images of the actual motion data that they're kind of capturing from the outside environment, send it to the headset. The headset will convert that JPEG into a PNG or a more uncompressed format, and then they will interpolate the actual images to discern motion. So this seems to be a way how they're actually getting past that 7 camera limit. Again, putting chips built into the controllers and then still having the XR2 chip in the headset for its own tracking, plus doing some of its other cool stuff with that. It's a brilliant idea. Now, we also know all about the leaks about the eye and face tracking. Yeah, it seems that they're actually doing IR-based camera tracking for eye tracking. Their new camera, which is called Camera Trip, can track up to 360 FPS, low latency, and it also acts as an ambient light sensor for waking up. And when it comes to face tracking, they seem to be using an OmniPixel 3 camera, which is again another IR camera, but it runs at 120 FPS, which is more than what you need for actual face tracking. Now here's where I probably lost people or got people very confused. I'm very good at that. I said at the beginning there's a Quest 2 Plus and a Quest Pro. What is the difference between these two headsets? Well, while I cannot discern every single difference, because again I am reading literal firmware links and kernel changes, and not everything in those leaks are obvious, I can say at least a few things that are very obvious. I personally believe the C-Cliff, which has been in the firmware files since the Quest 2 has been really released, is what's going to be the Oculus Quest 2 Plus. I believe it's going to have the eye and face tracking, and it's going to be sort of a refresh of the Quest 2 with those features. I also believe that they're going to be implementing a BOE dual cell LCD. It's very similar to the LCD that they have in their current headset, same resolution, everything, but the way this LCD works is they actually stack 2 LCD layers on top of each other, one on monochrome, one in color, and then the benefit of doing this is actually getting better blacks, which is one of the weaknesses of LCDs, and doing this dual layer LCD is still cheaper than 2 separate micro OLED displays. And of course, this same resolution will still run at 120Hz, and this is all coming from kernel files. This is not stuff I'm making up. Now, what about the Quest Pro? Well, I have to say that I actually am not sure if the Quest Pro is going to be released this year. I think the Quest 2 Plus is, but I think the Quest Pro is actually going to be more targeted for either mid to early next year. I'm going to explain why right now. Literally yesterday, a new kernel file was added for a new type of display. And do you know what those types of displays are? I've been talking about them a lot on my channel recently. That's right, OLED micro displays. Literally a kernel file has been appeared for a micro OLED display, 2 of them, 1 per eye, that is at 2768 by 3000 resolution per eye at 90 Hz. I believe this is the main feature of the Quest Pro whenever it comes out. Of course, micro OLED displays are small, they make the form factor much better and the weight lighter. Not only that, you get all the benefits of OLED. You get better contrast values, better colors, better light dimming, everything. But the issues with OLED micro displays is they're smaller than the normal displays, so they need more specialized lens. So I think that Oculus is still manufacturing them, according to a more earlier leak about how they are actually using the same company as Sony, who is projected to release a headset next year with OLED displays. They're using the same manufacturer that are making more advanced, lenses that can actually compensate for the small actual displays without losing the actual clarity and artifacting of the actual tiny screens. Because the more you magnify in screens, the more likely you're going to lose some details, so it's very important you have more complex lenses to compensate. But some other cool things, we were just talking about how the constellation system or laser sweeping from the actual headset can be used for tracking. But it can also be used for depth scanning. Why is that important? Do you know what mixed reality is? It's basically AR but through camera pass-through. I believe all of these headsets I'm talking about is gonna finally get color pass-through for, well, cameras. Which is probably very important for Facebook because they're trying to beat Apple out of the gate. Apple is actually projected to release their sort of version of a headset that was purely designed for mixed reality, working on a video about that, mid to late next year. So it's very important for Facebook to sort of get ahead of the competition because as the technology matures, bigger players like Apple, Amazon, Google, they're all watching what's going on, right? And they want to get in when the getting's good. So Facebook has to sort of make a name for themselves now, and as fast as they can. So yeah, color pass-through, mixed reality, apparently color 3D avatar scanning, and 3D environment scanning and sharing. Do you know like LiDAR, how people actually scan environments with LiDAR with their iPhones? It seems to be like that, except it's not LiDAR, it's more like time of flight 3D scanning, which is still good. I hope you don't mind Facebook being able to scan your entire room and everything in it, and setting metadata files for every object in your room, like they showed off at Oculus Connect 2019. And finally, the Pro controllers seem to have better finger tracking. So pair that with face tracking, eye tracker, better finger tracking, better displays, smaller form factor. The Quest Pro is probably going to be a lot more expensive. And the Quest 2 Plus is probably going to be only a little bit more expensive. But it's going to be better in every way. Now I know what a lot of people are thinking, I just bought a Quest 2. Am I doomed? Well, no, because you are still going to be running on the same chip as all these other headsets. They are running on XR2. So any sort of content built for these other headsets will still work for your Quest 2. In fact, that's kind of the point of optimization for this one line of CPUs. But really, that's all I have to say about this. I gotta give special thanks to Basti564. Check out his channel in the description below. He does a lot of awesome Quest firmware leaking and stuff, and I would recommend you go to his channel because he's probably going to make an even more in-depth video about the software side of the Quest 2 Plus and Quest Pro more than I can. I'm more focused on the hardware stuff. But yeah, what do you think? I know you might think, Brad, did you just rant on about stuff that doesn't exist? Well, let me rant on something else that might not exist, just for a little bit. There was one more bonus patent. I'm not sure we should really give it too much merit, but with this new tracking system I literally just spent a lot of time talking about, they talked about how they can have accessories or objects that can also apply their own data to the cameras to do their own tracking for sort of stuff such as a keyboard. But I think the more interesting part is this keyboard example they use in the patent really can mean anything. In fact, the keyboard literally talks about having a motion sensor and IR given off, and imagine if they use that for full body trackers. Facebook's already ahead of the game by implementing eye and face tracking very soon. It's very likely for me to believe that they might be implementing full body trackers soon with this new tracking technology. Even if it's not for this generation, but maybe for the next. That's just something to think about. Social VR is best with face tracking, eye tracking, and of course full body tracking. Anyway, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a great day, and I'm gonna go pass out because this, again, stressed the hell out of me. Bye!